Hello, everybody, and welcome to Session 7. We're going to be doing comprehension and vocabulary. This is an extremely dense 2 chapters, and so I really wanted to take some time to go over it with all of you to make sure that we knew what was going on. Because the first thing we're going to start to tackle, reading comprehension theories. The chapters narrow it down to 2 reading comprehension theories, although there's many of them. The 2 that they work on is the schema theory. This is the first one, where readers use prior knowledge to understand and learn from texts. So they're using their own knowledge when they're encountering a text. So let's say the child reads about a puppy. And the puppy, when they're reading about it, the puppy is playful. And they feel happy because they've had experiences with puppies before. They think about it being soft. They can bring that in. They can bring in that physical state of soft. They can bring in the mood, which is happy and playful, because they have had their own experiences. We move on to taxonomies. In the book, they have different definitions of it, but this is the much more widely used version of taxonomies. The first is level 1, which is a literal comprehension, which means that children understand and recall information from the actual text they're reading. So they read the book and they can tell you exactly what happened, or pretty much what happened in terms of the story and the steps in the story. Level 2, like each level, builds on the previous one. Inference. So a child uses their previous knowledge, intuition, and imagination to understand the selection. So we're going to go back to what we learned in schemas, where we're going to start thinking about that puppy. The child is going to bring that own experience into understanding what happens in that story. And they're not able to do that unless they literally understand what has happened in the story. The next is evaluation, when a child is making judgments by comparing it with information from the teacher or by other sources. So if they're reading that the world is flat, they're going to say, well, the teacher and my parents told me the world is not flat, so this can't be right. They're going to bring that in and realize that this is part of the fantasy of the story. Level 4 is enjoying it. And they really need to be able to do each one of those other levels to get to that, is appreciating the story, to find that story scary, to find that story exciting or happy. And they really can't do that unless they understand what's happening with the story. Now, there's ways of assessing comprehension. One way would be observation, is by watching a child read. Is the child constantly going back to the beginning of the story to understand what's happening? Is the child losing interest? Are they picking one type of books, or are they all over the place? By observing them, you can tell whether or not they really understand what's happening in the story. But you want to go further. You want to question them. You want to have some questions and discussions with them. What happened in the story? Why do you think Billy made that decision that he made? By asking questions, you can find out a lot about what's going on with a child's comprehension. Now, there are some other kinds of assessments you can use. One is an IRI, and you're going to be doing a lot of work with IRIs. So we're going to move over to the closed procedure. A closed is where the reader has to supply the words that have been deleted from a text. So I've used one example here, which is Clifford. So Cleo sits on Emily's blank lap. T-Bone sits on blank Elizabeth's lap. Clifford does blank fit. You need to understand the story in order to complete these sentences. The maze procedure is thought to be a little bit more supportive of a reader, and it gives you a lot of words that you can choose from. So it may say, Cleo sits on Emily's brother's lap, Emily's red lap, Emily's, you need to know the story in order to be able to supply the right answer. Now, after you have your assessment finished, you really need to figure out how you're going to support that reader. And so these are some ideas on how you can support the children in your classroom with reading comprehension. One way is with a direct thinking activity. And we've got a few thinking activities that go a little bit more into detail, and this is one of the basic ones. Predicting what's going to happen in the story. Will Clifford get bigger? Will he get small? Reading the story. Clifford does indeed get bigger. Proving it. I can tell from the text when Clifford could not fit back out the door that he got too big. So The next way to do it is reciprocal readings. And really, this is the same as the last reading that we had. It just gets into a little bit more detail, questioning, clarifying, predicting, and summarizing. Now, another way to do, to figure out comprehension in a different form is to web. And children really do enjoy this. And you can do this with beginning writers who really have more of a hard time writing these things out and having them create a web of what happens during the story. You can do it with main characters, you can do it with story arcs, and children really do enjoy this. It also helps with sequencing. Another is to create a story map. This is one example of a map. You could have a beginning, middle, and end. You could have the problem, plan, resolution. So there's lots of ways you can lay this out, and this also can be done with pre-writers. Now, the book goes into a lot of detail about the QARs, the question-answer relationships. And I suggest that you take a good look at this chapter because it really is helpful. It starts out in the book, so they're going to use the text to be able to answer questions. Who did what? Where did they go? How many people were there? There's going to think and searches. So they're going to have to use the text to support some of the questions that they have. What examples are there that Clifford got bigger? How many times did you try to get through the door? These things can be found in the text. Now we're going to move away from that. We're going to say, in my head. So we're going to move into abstract thought. This can be quite difficult for the little ones, but as they get older, as they start to hit second grade, they are capable of doing some of these, especially with teacher guidance. So some of the questions are going to be able to predict things, look at the main ideas. We're going back to really that webbing, but it's the on my own. Have you ever taking that story to your own experiences? Do you agree with? How do you feel about? So this is really moving that comprehension to the next level where they start to internalize it and they start to come up with some questions and look to the text and look towards their own recollection of the story to be able to answer questions. So now we move on to the next chapter and we move right into vocabulary acquisition. How do children learn words? And how do they learn words when they're reading? So a lot of times children will see, this is the stages of learning a word. They've never seen the word before. They've heard it, but they don't know what it means. They think they know what it means because of the way it's been used, but they're not 100% sure. And then they know it. They can speak and they can write with it. One of the ways that they can figure out words they don't know is by context clues. This is a great strategy, and they look into the sentence or the passage to start to figure out what that word means. They may still be a little uncertain about it, but with some help from the teacher, they can get very good at this strategy. Another is categorization. Okay? And so what we're going to look at is we're going to look at how does this fit in with words that we know. So they may not understand mammals yet, but when we give them examples of mammals, they do. They put it into the categories. And we've learned this concept of things that are warm-blooded. It makes sense. So we move it into a group of other things. Analogies. So the child figures something out by its relationship to another. So a dog is to a puppy, as a cat is to a kitten. So they know that a puppy is a baby dog. They might not know what a kitten is yet, but when they compare it, they start to understand. So there's a lot in this chapter. As I said, it's quite dense. I have some YouTube videos that also have been included in the session if you want to take a closer look at some of the resources, especially in terms of assessment. And I hope you're enjoying the class. Thank you so much for joining me today.